Order, order. We start with questions. The Secretary of State for the Home Department, Andy Carter.
Question number 1, please, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, good afternoon. With permission, I'll group this with question 15. Last year, we cleared the equivalent of 92,000 legacy asylum claims, and we processed a total of over 112,000 claims, largest volume in 2 decades. The total asylum backlog is now at its lowest point since December 2022. Recruitment of processors continues, and we will continue to review and improve our processes to accelerate the decision-making from here on in.
Andy Carter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm very grateful to the Home Secretary for that update. There are still 4 hotels in and around Warrington housing asylum seekers. Can you give us an update on closing hotels? And what steps is he taking to speed up the processing of refugees when they're in a hotel waiting the outcome of their claim?
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend makes an important link between the speed of asylum processing and the need for asylum accommodation of various forms, including hotels. We're moving away from using hotels as an accommodation type, reducing the cost to the public purse, and we will maintain recruitment levels and improve processes so that the speed of processing which we now see will be continued. Whilst I can't make commitments about the specific hotels in his constituency, he should rest assured that we're seeking to drive down the numbers that we rely upon.
Wendy Chamberlain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituent arrived in the UK 15 months ago and was interviewed, but has been waiting now over a year to get a final response. And he's not alone. According to the Refugee Council, 33,085 asylum cases have been lodged in the last 6 months alone, putting ever more strain on a broken system. So the Secretary of State outlined the fact that the legacy backlog is going down, but what about those more recent cases? Can he outline what has been done to deal with those?
Well, the improved processes and increased numbers of Home Office officials working on this will mean that not only the legacy cases are dealt with more quickly, but the current cases are dealt with more quickly, reducing the need for asylum accommodation of all types. Whilst I can't comment on individual cases, because of course circumstances differ from each one, she should rest assured that the lessons we have learnt about the increased speed of processing will benefit those already in the system. And of course, we're also determined to drive down the number of people coming here in the first place, reducing the pressure on our asylum processing system in doing so.
Mr. Stephen Kinnock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the shambolic incompetence of this government across every aspect of its disgraceful mismanagement of our country's asylum system knows no bounds. But today I'll highlight a particularly egregious example. We already knew that removal of asylum seekers whose claims have been rejected have collapsed by 50% since Labour left office in 2010. But over the weekend it emerged that the Home Office has lost contact with an astonishing 85% of the 5,000 people who've been identified for removal to Rwanda. So can I ask the Home Secretary, where on earth are these 4,250 asylum seekers who've gone missing? Will he drop all the smoke and mirrors and acknowledge that the Rwanda plan is just an extortionately expensive and unworkable distraction? Yep. And finally, when will he adopt Labour's plan to recruit 1,000 additional immigration enforcement officers to a new returns unit so that we can have a system that's based on common sense?
Thank you. No, it's not thank you. Can I just say, I've got to get a lot of people in, and it's totally unfair. That was very, very long, and I was coughing to give you to stop. Not to continue. The signal we need to understand is if you don't want a particular backbencher to get in, please point them out, because it's giving me that problem. Home Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, the mask has slipped with regard to the Labour Party. The quote from the Labour Party that even if the Rwanda scheme were to be successful, they would not keep it. And that shows what the party opposite really thinks about this. They have no plan, they have no commitment, and they've even said that if something is working, they would scrap it.
Nigel Mills.
Number 2, please.
Should ask one question. Number 2.
My apologies, Mr. Speaker. I was so busy listening to the heckling opposite. It was very difficult to focus on what was actually going on. Look, This question is actually about something that we should be very, very proud of. The fact is that fraud ruins lives, and yet this government has managed to get fraud down 13% year on year, online and offline. And it's extremely important that we continue this ambitious agenda and make sure we continue to cut fraud so that we can bring it down completely by the end of the Parliament.
Nigel Mills.
I thank him for the answer. Would he agree that key to reducing levels of fraud is to help people understand what might be a fraud so they're not actually taken in by it? And therefore, is there more we can do to help people spot the signs and not become a victim in the first place?
The question about what is a fraud is something that I'm afraid is becoming all too prevalent. We've heard of many, many different kinds of frauds coming up in many different areas. And that's why in a few weeks' time, I hope, we're going to be launching a new comms campaign about this. Because the truth is, it affects so many people in so many different ways that what we're trying to do now is to make sure people know what's going on so that they can actually claim the help and support they need to make sure we defeat this pernicious evil.
Ray Morris.
Isn't it true that police simply do not have the resources or expertise to tackle fraud? I have a constituent still waiting for a charging decision 5 years after being the victim of fraud. Her retirement's been ruined, waiting for the police and the CPS to make a charging decision. Durham Constabulary has a single forensic account. Does the Minister believe, as I do, that a lack of specialist resources is leading to these unacceptable delays in justice?
Well, I completely understand his point, which is exactly why this government has introduced a new National Fraud Squad, which is almost fully recruited now at 400, and has increased funding available to forces in order to fight fraud. There are some forces that are doing exceptionally well at this already. Avon is doing extremely well, and of course City of London Police is doing exceptionally well at leading on fraud nationally.
Stephen Bonner.
3, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Home Office engages with the devolved nations through the interministerial group and recognises that each of the nations of the UK have varying immigration needs, reflected in the varied shortage occupation lists for each nation. Immigration will, however, remain reserved. It's not possible to operate distinct systems without effectively creating an internal UK migration border system.
Stephen Bonner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Figures from the ONS have revealed that changes to the minimum income threshold for family and skilled workers disproportionately impact Scotland. Median earnings on the west coast of Scotland are at £24,700 a year. That's far shorter than even the climb-down figure of £29,000. So did the Home Secretary even consider this insular policy effectively cuts off migration to parts of Scotland in areas where we need and would benefit from inward migration?
Well, the government's position is clear that the changes that we are introducing are the right thing. The numbers of dependents that we're seeing coming, for example, is disproportionate, and there will, of course, be the opportunity through the review of the immigration salary list and the composition of that in the second phase, a chance through the call for evidence for exactly those sorts of debates to be had and for those views to be made known.
SNP spokesperson, listen to this.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Home Office's knee-jerk policy to raise the threshold and then their sudden partial reverse ferret to bring it back down again slightly caused a huge amount of distress to people up and down these islands who don't know now what the future holds for them and their families. Can I ask the Minister what quality impact assessment has been carried out on this policy, which will disproportionately, as well as affecting Scotland, will disproportionately affect women?
Well, the Home Secretary made a commitment when he announced these changes to lay the information in the House Library around the projected volumes. It seems to me that she's criticising the government for not taking the steps that we have taken to say very clearly that these changes will not be applied retrospectively. We think that that is the right thing to do. We think that it's provided reassurance to people, but ultimately we do need to get net migration under control, and we think that this is a pragmatic and sensible package to take forward.
I'll listen to this.
That does not answer the question that I put to the Minister at all. What quality impact assessment has been carried out on this policy? What recognition of wage levels in Scotland has been carried out on this policy? He can't tell me, what my constituents tell me, is that they are worried about their spouse coming over from Australia who works as a legal administrator, a man who's worried about his nephew and his partner, that they'll never be able to return from Canada if they want to come back to live in Scotland, and many, many more who are guilty only of falling in love with somebody of what the government considers the wrong nationality. Will he apologise to them for the chaos that their policies have caused?
The position is as per that which I have set out. We think that the number of people coming to this country in this way is not sustainable. This is a pragmatic, balanced package that we are taking forward. And, as I've said, these measures will not be applied retrospectively, and so it does not affect existing applications that have been lodged.
Sarah Dunn.
Question number 4, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Government takes domestic burglary very, very seriously indeed. That is why we obtained a commitment from police just over a year ago to always attend every incident of residential burglary, and that is delivering results, because year on year residential burglary has fallen, according to the crime survey, by 8%.
Sarah Dyke.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his response. In 2022, the cost of rural theft in the South West rose by 16.6% from the year before. Has the Minister made an assessment of the success of the new National Rural Crime Unit with regards to improving police contacts with victims of rural theft?
Well, I agree with the Honourable Lady. Combating rural crime is extremely important, and the rural crime unit she refers to is designed to do exactly that. We are, of course, also legislating. We have legislated and will be implementing the legislation to ensure that things like all-terrain vehicles and agricultural equipment have to be marked or fitted with an immobiliser. But let's, just for the House's benefit, since 2010, overall domestic burglary has fallen by 57%.
John Penrose.
Question 5, Mr Speaker.
Question 5. Mr Speaker, so it is. I thought I was going to get just a moment off there. I did get a moment off. I thank my honourable friend for his question. The drug strategy commitments are being delivered, including investing over £300 million in additional treatment capacity, creating over 50,000 extra treatment places, but also enforcing hard, for example, by closing down over 2,000 county lines since 2019.
Mr Speaker, local police in and around Weston-super-Mare have had notable successes in disrupting drug dealing and supply, but new dealers quickly take the place of the old ones. The quantities of drugs and the numbers of addicts aren't declining. Would the Minister accept that while enforcement and education are vital, they aren't enough to solve this problem on their own, and that the underlying legal frameworks which we use to control these dangerous chemicals have to be addressed too?
Well, enforcement is important. Besides closing down those 2,000 county lines, Border Force in the year ending March 22, for example, seized around about 19 tonnes of cocaine, the largest amount seized in a single year on record. I've mentioned treatment already. The most important thing is to get people out of their addiction entirely, and that's why we're investing so much extra money in treatment. In terms of the legal framework, there are no plans to change that. Drugs are illegal for a reason. They're highly addictive and harmful. And if you look at some jurisdictions that have liberalised significantly, for example, California, San Francisco, and so on, the out-of-control public drug consumption in those jurisdictions is not something we want to see happening in this country.
Mr Speaker, can I thank the Minister very much for that response, Minister. The problem for us in Northern Ireland where drugs escalating, the consumption, the movement of drugs, is coming from England to Northern Ireland. It's also coming from the Republic of Ireland to Northern Ireland as well. Can I ask the Minister what discussions he'd be able to have with the Republic of Ireland to ensure that the drugs across the border can be stopped, and also coming from England to Northern Ireland as well? Thanks very much.
Well, I think the honourable member raises an important point. Of course, one of the features of the island of Ireland is that there is essentially no border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, which does, of course, pose various challenges, and he's alluded to them in his question. I would be happy to take this up and see what more there is to do, we can do to disrupt the supply of drugs north-south and east-west as well. So I thank him for raising the issue.
Number 6, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. With your permission, I'd like to group this question with 14, 20, 22 and 25. We're making significant progress in closing hotels, with 50 due to be closed by the end of January and more in the coming months. We're also working to move asylum seekers into alternative, cheaper accommodation and have successfully cleared the legacy backlog by deciding more than 112,000 cases, whilst maintaining the integrity of the system.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Last year, after raising concerns by me, the police, the fire service, the Home Office did close the Oyo Hotel in Earl Shilton. However, Leicestershire still does have hotels open. Just over the border in Appleby Magna, for example, my constituents are concerned. Now, would he set out a timeline about when these hotels may close, or more likely set out a suitability for those hotels that are least suitable to be closed first, so that as the backlog is dealt with, so does the closing of the hotels fall in line too?
Well, as I was able to set out, we are making good progress, and I hear calls from colleagues across the House for closures in their constituencies. We need to stick the course around the delivery of this, taking into account a number of factors, including the ease of exit, the speed of exit, the fact that notice periods come into play, but also, crucially, value for money, which is what I think the taxpayer would rightly expect.
Through.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In welcoming my honourable friend to his new position, can I urge him to finally make good on the promise of his predecessor to close the temporary accommodation centres in my constituency and restore 2 hotels back to their intended purpose? And could he also work with his colleagues in the Department for Levelling Up to ensure that the local links rule relating to social housing is amended to prevent Aberavon from being disproportionately burdened by new applications once residents are awarded asylum?
Well, I hear my honourable friend's calls for the specific hotel in her constituency to be closed, and she can be absolutely reassured that this is something that we will continue to work closely with colleagues across government to get right, to make sure that we can exit hotels as quickly as possible. As I say, I hear her point.
And the Wheeler.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I thank my honourable friend for his earlier answers. As you know, today I received official notification that Newton Park Hotel, which was a 4-star hotel in the South Derbyshire constituency, which use had been taken over entirely by asylum seekers, is to have the contract ended at the end of February. This is an enormous relief to those in this small village and indeed in other villages where the important V3 bus route goes through. Can I thank him for keeping to the word of his predecessor that the hotel use for asylum seekers would end in the second tranche of closures?
The situation in my honourable friend's constituency, and I'm grateful to her for the representations that she has made on this issue, demonstrates that the government's plan is working, that we are seeing those hotel exits happen, and that is a direct consequence of getting on and making decisions, bringing forward alternative accommodation, but also, and I think this is the crucial point, reducing inflow into the system in the first place.
Jack Brereton.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I welcome the progress that's been made on illegal small road crossings, which has meant it's been possible to end the use of the North Stafford Hotel in Stoke-on-Trent. But would my honourable friend agree that it's only through the most unequivocal legislations on Rwanda, which we can deliver proper deterrence that will mean that numbers will come down further?
The point that my honourable friend makes absolutely gets to the nub of the issue. One of the most important factors in terms of sustaining the progress that we have made is to reduce the number of inflows into the UK, particularly via those small boat crossings of the Channel. And that is why my message to the House is clear, that if you want to see hotels closed, you want to see the progress sustained, need to be in the lobby supporting the bill this week.
Alexander Stafford.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Speaker. My constituents and I were delighted at the end of last year to see the end of the Ibis Hotel in Bramley being used to house illegal immigrants and return to normal service. Can the Minister reassure me that any forthcoming immigration legislation passed by this House will make sure that this will never happen again, either by banning the use of hotels outright, and make sure that those illegal immigrants are instead sent to Rwanda for processing?
As I've said, the key principle behind the bill is to help us to bring to an end these egregious crossings of the Channel organised by evil criminal gangs that help us to ensure that there is greater control of our borders and that makes sure that there are not these inflows into the system that undoubtedly have had the consequence of needing to respond to that challenge through the opening of hotels. That's precisely what we're trying to put a stop to.
Chair of the Select Committee, Dave Dangers.
Last week, The Times reported that there are 10,000 hotel beds going unused at a cost of £1.5 million a day. This is in addition to the 3,500 buffer of empty beds held as a contingency in case of Manston being overwhelmed. Are those figures actually correct?
The Right Honourable Lady will recognise that it is, of course, important for there to be a buffer to make sure that operationally we have the bed spaces that are required in a contingency situation to be able to respond to any surges and any particular challenges. That is a difficult area, but it is one that we are looking at very carefully. We are, of course, within the hotel estate, maximising the use of bed spaces wherever possible, which again helps us to get on and close these hotels in the way that I think she would want to see.
Five bets.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The downside of the volume of asylum applications being granted is the pressure that's putting on local authority homeless sections. Will the Minister have another look at the time that's given asylum seekers from the date their application is accepted to the date they have to move out of Home Office accommodation, from the 28 days to the 56 days, which is the recognised limit under the Homeless Reduction Act? Otherwise, all we're going to do is transfer people from Home Office-funded hotels to local authority-funded hotels with all the extra pressure of financial problems that creates for local authorities.
Hear, hear.
One of the things that we're doing with local authorities is working with them around the dates to try and give as early a visibility as possible as to the anticipated numbers that people and that local authorities should be expecting to see with decisions being granted. That helps, of course, to forward plan. Very mindful of these points. There are no intentions to change that 28-day period as things stand. And again, I think clearly planning and working with local authorities is critical in all of this. It's also just worth saying that in many cases people will have more than 28 days through which to vacate.
Oldham has a proud history of supporting those fleeing persecution. As of March last year, our town is host to 910 asylum seekers, 145 of whom are in hotel accommodation. But here, the housing crisis meets the homeless crisis. 1,000 people in temporary accommodation, including 500 children. Isn't now the time for the government to review the dispersal policy to ensure that every part of England plays its fair share? And can I gently point out that Braintree is home to just 2 asylum seekers to Oldham's 910?
The honourable gentleman can be absolutely reassured that one of the things that I am looking at carefully, as our officials, is what more we can do to ensure that there is equitability around the approach to dispersal. That is absolutely critical. We do think that we need to work carefully through some of the pressures and challenges that these issues present. But again, I just make the point gently to the benches opposite that one of the key parts of the response to this is to get the flows into the system down, and they don't have a credible plan to do that.
Hi, Bethard.
Mr. Speaker, there are currently 56,000 people in asylum seekers in hotels, and the Prime Minister promised to close those hotels sometime last year, but since then it's gone up by 10,000. Can you confirm that that figure is correct?
The figure that he has cited, and the figure that I think the Right Honourable Lady, the Shadow Home Secretary, used last week, I am clear in my mind does not represent the picture as it stands today. She will recognise, and he will recognise too, that there are periodic reportings around statistical releases, but the fact is the figures that they cite are not representative of the position on the ground today.
Martin Vickers.
Number 7, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, with permission, I'll answer questions 7, 11 and 23 together. On the 4th of December, I announced a new package of measures to further reduce legal net migration, including limitations on family dependents being brought in by workers and students, increasing the salary threshold and raising the minimum income requirement progressively over the next few years.
Martin Vickers.
I thank my right honourable friend for his reply. He will know that the net migration figures of over 700,000 is completely unsustainable. It represents the creation of 10 new parliamentary constituencies each year if it were to continue. What cooperation does his department have with the public services which have to meet the demands from the newcomers?
He is absolutely right that we do need to be conscious of the impact on local populations and local authorities from the level of net migration. We recognise the figure is too high. We are taking action to bring that figure down. We work closely with other government departments in delivering on that. But I'm struck that whilst the opposition front bench criticise the headline figure, the other opposition benches also oppose every single step that we take to bring that figure down.
So David Evan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I commend my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, and the Minister for Legal Migration for all their work towards delivering on our manifesto commitment to reduce net migration. My constituents are now looking for the results of all their hard work. However, could he outline how his new legal migration package makes the most of our post-Brexit points-based immigration system?
Mr. Speaker, this country has always had a global outlook. The ethnic composition of the government at the most senior levels is a direct reflection of our global connectivity and those human bridges across the world. We want to make sure that this country is able to benefit from the expertise, knowledge and work of the brightest and best from around the whole world in a manner which is controlled, which is fair, which is predictable and which is well enforced.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's good that the government wants to ensure that the brightest and best can continue to come to the UK to study. But does my right honourable friend recognise that the changes to the family dependent rules for students risk causing enormous damage to some of our elite business schools who compete in a global marketplace for experienced, outstanding professionals? And what is he doing to work with the sector to try and overcome some of these challenges that are being created for them?
My right honourable friend is right to highlight the fact that we are in a globally competitive environment when it comes to the quality higher education and postgraduate offer that this country has. I have no doubt that we are still highly competitive. We will continue to work with the university sector on this and ensure that the people that we bring to the UK are here to study and add value, and that no institution in our higher education sector is mistaking their role. They are educators, they are not a backdoor visa system.
Sherman.
Mr. Speaker, can I beg the Home Secretary to spread his more enlightened views that he's just announced to some of his colleagues? Because migration shouldn't be a dirty word. I'm the son of a migrant. I migrated myself to the United States at one stage. My DNA tells me that I'm 34% Irish, 32% Swedish. Could we please have every member of this Parliament have their DNA published and bring some sense into this discussion about migration?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure the government is able to compel such widespread disclosures. Perhaps IPSO might have a view on such things. I'm immigrant stock on both sides of my family. My mother came to the UK in the 1960s. My father's family came to the UK in 1066. And this country has benefited from controlled immigration in a fair system where people who play by the rules are rewarded and we say no to those who refuse to play by the rules.
Speaker, I am a legal migrant too. Bath has a vibrant hospitality industry that caters to local people and tourists from all over the world, but many of our hotels, restaurants, bars and pubs already struggle to find enough staff or under threat of closure or reduced working hours. How will he ensure that the new salary thresholds proposed under measures to reduce legal migration do not worsen these staff shortages?
We liaise very closely with other government departments to ensure that a system which is transparent and fair also supports the British economy. We work particularly closely with the Department of Work and Pensions to ensure that those people who have talent, who have ambition, but who currently, for whatever reason, are not fully engaged in the job market, are able to do so. We want the hospitality industry, I have a background in the hospitality industry myself, we want the hospitality industry in the UK to continue to thrive. It is not the case that we should automatically rely on overseas labour to do so. We can have homegrown talent as well.
Thank you. The Home Secretary talked about people coming to UK universities to study,
But also there are many people that come to our universities to carry out groundbreaking and economically very important research, and they are very worried about the impact of the minimum income thresholds going up, because that means they won't be able to bring their families with them. What assessment has he made on the impact of the important research work that our universities are carrying out of the new changes?
As I say, we recognise the contribution of the international pool of talent. Indeed, when I was Foreign Secretary, I signed up a deal with India for talented postgraduates to exchange experience in our respective countries. We will always look to support the genuine draw on talent, but we will also make sure that the higher education system is not used as a backdoor means of immigration. It is there for research and education, not a backdoor means of getting permanent residence in this country.
Right, we come to Chris Elmore.
Number 8, sir.
Was that still me, I think? Mr. Speaker, giving police the resources that they need to police local communities and fight crime remains a priority for this government. We have delivered on our commitment to recruit 20,000 additional police officers. Indeed, we are over that. Decisions about how they are deployed are, of course, a discussion and a decision for Chief Constables and Police and Crime Commissioners and Mayors who are responsible to their local communities.
Chris Elmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The legacy of cuts from this government has left police forces across England and Wales with a £3.2 billion cash shortfall. 6,000 frontline officers are now being taken away from frontline policing duties to complete the roles of former police staff. So can the Minister, can the Home Secretary, in fact, start to acknowledge the Tory cuts? How is he going to rectify it and get more frontline police back onto our neighbourhoods across the United Kingdom?
Well, as I say, the decision for how a police force balances its back office, important back office roles and its frontline policing roles is rightly one for the Chief Constable. We have given additional resource. We have delivered on our commitment to have more police officers. Of course, we are looking at police funding formulas to ensure that they remain well-resourced, but there are more police officers now, over 20,000 more, in fact 20,947 additional officers in England and Wales. That will ensure that there are more police on the front line.
And the Minister Alex Norris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As my honourable friend says, that to this day we are still feeling the devastating impact of the Tories' decision to cut 20,000 police officers. Ministers, indeed the Home Secretary, seem to expect credit for desperately trying to reverse it, but the National Police Chiefs Council were right, weren't they? The efforts at reversal have moored 6,000 warranted officers in roles traditionally filled by civilians. Again, we've heard from the Home Secretary that we've never had it so good, but there are still 10,000 fewer neighbourhood police. Why won't they match our commitment for 13,000 more police and PCSOs out on the beat?
Match it.
Mr. Speaker, unless they actually have a plan for paying for those figures, it is just empty rhetoric. The simple truth of the matter is there are record numbers of police officers in police forces around the country. They have indeed, including Essex Police, who I visited this morning. They have never had more police officers than they currently have got. It is right for Chief Constables to decide how to deploy those police officers, but again, unless we hear from them a plan of paying for those additional officers, then I just won't trust their figures.
Richard Thompson.
Number 9, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've been mindful of the need to balance the impacts on individual sectors with economic growth and the needs of the labour market with the need to reduce levels of immigration. As part of our policy development, we undertook analytical work across government which supports the decisions we made. A regulatory impact assessment will be developed in due course.
Richard. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Director of Universities Scotland, Alistair Sim, has expressed concerns that changes to the government's visa's income threshold could affect the ability of universities to attract global talent. Now, international students and academics make a contribution in excess of £5 billion annually to the Scottish economy. Now, if this government, as it says, recognises the contributions of international students and academics, why are they introducing a policy which threatens to prevent future cohorts of those international students and academics from making a similar contribution into the future?
Well, I believe that individuals will still be able to make a valid contribution in the years ahead, but in a sustainable and managed way. There are no immediate plans to introduce further exemptions to the increased salary threshold, but the salary discounts remain in place presently. We will continue to engage as these measures are introduced, and I would also just say that there are opportunities domestically for recruitment, and I think we ought to be at every opportunity trying to support domestic recruitment wherever we can.
Number 12, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Work is continuing to update the funding formula, and I'll update the House as soon as I am able to. But the House should be aware that next year, 2024-25, Police and Crime Commissioners funding frontline police will see their budgets increased by up to £922 million, an increase of around about 6%.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's cross-party agreement that the current funding formula is unfair for police in Bedfordshire, with the Conservatives' own PCC acknowledging that there is simply no meat left on the bone for local police. My constituents are fed up of being told they've never had it so good or fobbed off with one-off grants. Will the Minister commit to a date to finally deliver a fair funding formula for my communities?
Well, what I'll commit to, as far as the people of Bedfordshire are concerned, is an increase next year, 24-25, an increase in funding of £10.2 million. That's an extra 6.5% compared to this year. And they also have 1,455 police officers. That is about 200 more than the Bedfordshire Police Force have ever had at any time in their history.
Fuller. Well, unusual to hear from two Bedfordshire MPs when it comes back to the police funding formula, because this goes all the way back to the last Labour government. But there is cross-party view in Bedfordshire that Bedfordshire police are underfunded. So will my friend the Minister agree to meet with all the MPs of Bedfordshire so we can press the case for continued funding, increases in funding for Bedfordshire Police?
Well, I'm always happy to meet my honourable friend to discuss these issues. As I say, Bedfordshire Police will receive an extra £10.2 million next year, an increase of about 6.5%, which I'm sure will be welcome up and down the county. But of course, yes, I'm happy to meet my honourable friend whenever he would like.
I presume that's all of them, was it, Minister? Ferriel Clark, Shadow Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, not listening to police forces raising serious concerns about a funding formula and about how it's affecting, how it's limiting the ability to tackle town centre crime. The British Retail Consortium report that there are more than 850 acts of violence or abuse against shop workers every single day. Mr. Speaker, everyone has a right to feel safe at work. So when will the Home Secretary accept that retail crime is out of control and accept Labour's plan to introduce a new law to protect retail workers from violence and actually stand up for shop workers?
Well, theft offences, of course, are down by 47% since 2010. But we have crime survey figures. But we have recently launched a retail crime action plan where police are committing to prioritise attendance at the incidents of retail crime and always follow reasonable lines of inquiry in relation to shoplifting, assaults against shop workers and other forms of offending as well. In addition to that, we legislated in the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act in various ways.
Question 13, please, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, with permission, I will answer question 13 and 16 together. This government recognises the impact of neighbourhood crime. It's the crime that most affects people's confidence, both that of individuals, businesses and communities. The strategic response to this is evidence-based and targeted, and getting policing right in this area is incredibly important for maintaining community confidence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've seen for myself how successful the government's Safer Streets Fund was in Barnstaple, and I'm delighted it's to be extended into Ilfracombe this year. Can my right honourable friend ensure that councils have the funding to help support these schemes?
I thank my honourable friend for highlighting this point. I'm very proud of the fact that since 2010, neighbourhood crime is down by 51% because of the kind of interventions that she has highlighted. I can reassure her that we will continue to look at what works, we will continue to fund and support, and we will continue to make every effort to drive down neighbourhood crime even further.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Police numbers across Devon and Cornwall are at record levels and they deserve our praise. In a recent survey, my constituents in East Devon said tackling neighbourhood crime is an absolute priority. That's ranging from burglaries to thefts from vehicles. Can my right honourable friend outline what progress this Conservative government has made on cracking down on neighbourhood crime?
Well, I'm very pleased that his local community are feeling the positive impact of the decisions we made. And since coming into government, we have seen serious violence reduced by 26% since the start of this Parliament. We have also seen neighbourhood crime down by 27% since the start of this Parliament. 36% reduction in domestic burglary, 18% reduction in vehicle-related theft, 61% decrease in robbery, 18% decrease in vehicle-related theft. We've reduced homicide by 15%. We have seen action on drugs, and we are committed to go.
I've got the same to the Minister, please. You were very slow at the beginning, and you're not going to be slow at the end, I'm sure. Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. On Friday, I visited 5 co-op stores. Every single one of them had a daily experience of theft, one losing £35,000 worth of goods over 6 months, and staff experiencing assaults. In the light that Labour are introducing 13,000 more community policing and retail crime law, what is the Minister really doing? Because clearly his plan isn't working.
Mr Speaker, we have a retail crime action plan. We have ensured that assaults against shop workers is an aggregating factor, and we have made it clear to police forces across the country that we expect them to take action on neighbourhood crime like this, and that they will pursue every reasonable line of inquiry. We are absolutely determined to drive down retail crime.
Question 17, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The objective of the Safer Streets Fund and the Safety of Women at Night Fund is to enhance public safety in a direct and targeted way, neighbourhood by neighbourhood. Since 2020, the Government has invested £150 million across the 2 funds, and the evaluation of round 1 of the Safer Streets Fund, which was published in January of last year, showed that the investment was boosting trust in the police and making communities feel safer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does the Minister justify the Government cut of 38% of funding for projects to reduce violence against women and girls in Merseyside? And one project will have to cease.
Well, what I can tell the Honourable Lady is that under the Safer Streets Fund, £3.9 million has been allocated to Merseyside, including a project at St Helens Town Centre. Let me remind her very gently of what it's funding. It's gone towards lighting, signage, improvement to taxi ranks, and one of the most radical measures of all is that it provides women with a free taxi service home where the Safer Streets Fund will reimburse the taxi driver for the money they would otherwise not have received, so that a woman doesn't have to find herself standing at a windy bus stop or walking home.
Shadow Minister Alex Davies-Jones.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. We welcome the Safer Streets Fund, which will go some way to support the nighttime economy, which has been badly hit over 14 years. The Government's efforts to tackle spiking are also being completely undermined by the Home Secretary. Spiking is a serious and devastating offence. So why did the Home Secretary therefore think it was appropriate to joke about spiking his own wife? And can he confirm exactly how many drops of Rohypnol does he consider to be illegal?
I thank the Honourable Lady for her question. I think it has been widely reported that the Home Secretary was making a joke about not being good enough for his wife. The point is, we are the first government who has actually done something about spiking. It's not a new offence. The measures to change the statutory provisions in the Offences Against the Person Act could have been taken by the last Labour government. And actually the reason we've sought to clarify it in law is because we don't think that enough victims are coming forward. And the reason that we don't think there are enough prosecutions is because the time lag in getting effective toxicology reports, which is why we're investing so much money in rapid drinks testing kits, so that hopefully we'll be able to get the tests done on site, on the night, and get more of these offenders behind bars.
We now come to topicals. Kerry McCarthy.
Question number 1, Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker, this year the Home Office will continue to build on our progress on the public priorities. A 36% fall in small boats crossings last year, 86 arrests of small boat pilots, 246 arrests of people smugglers, the biggest ever international operation resulting in 136 boat seizures, 45 outboard motors being seized. We announced a legal migration package, more than 2,000 county lines, drugs lines smashed, the introduction of the Criminal Justice Bill to give the police leaders more powers. We are relentlessly focused on delivering community safety on behalf of the British people.
Now that we actually have the Home Secretary here to answer for himself, can he tell us if he is aware that the police are receiving more than 560 reports of spiking every month? And in December, the Home Office said the reason the crime is so prevalent is because it's seen as funny and a joke. How can we really have any confidence in the Home Secretary to deliver action on spiking when he himself thinks it's a joke?
Mr Speaker, I am the Home Secretary who has actually introduced action on this. On my first week in the job, I visited Holborn Police Station to see the work of the Metropolitan Police there, tackling violence against women and girls. I made it clear to the Home Office that my priority was the protection of women and girls. I am taking action on this issue, and I'm absolutely determined to continue to do so.
Nigel.
I'm sure the Home Secretary would agree that anti-extremism training in government departments is extremely important. What more can the government do to ensure it actually is training to tackle extremism and not just anti-government and party bias training?
Well, the honourable member will have seen recently a pretty extraordinary report on allegations about extremism and the failure to train properly what is going on in universities around the United Kingdom. There was one recent problematic case where they said it was very hard to define what a terrorist is. Well, I think we know what a terrorist is, the law knows what a terrorist is, and this government knows what a terrorist is, and that's exactly why we've just prescribed Hizb ut-Tahrir.
Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. We welcome the prescription of Hizb ut-Tahrir. 5 more lives were tragically lost in the Channel this weekend. As criminal gangs profit from these dangerous boat crossings, it shows how vital it is to stop them. But we need the Home Office to have a grip. The Home Secretary gave no answer earlier on the 4,000 people he has lost from the Rwanda list. Can he tell us if he has also lost the 35,000 people he has removed from the asylum backlog? How many of them are still in the country?
Mr Speaker, I join the Right Honourable Lady in expressing our sadness and condolences for those who lost their life in the Channel, reinforcing the importance of breaking the people smuggling gangs. The fact is that we are driving down the numbers of people in the backlog. We are processing applications more quickly. We are ensuring that decisions are made so that those who should not be in this country can be removed either to their own country or safe third country. That is why the Rwanda Bill is so very important. That's why we'll continue working on these issues.
But returns have dropped 50% since the last Labour government, and he's still not telling us where these missing people are. He appears to have lost thousands of people who may have no right to be in the country and lost any grip at all. In the ongoing Tory asylum chaos, we've got cabinet ministers and countless ex-ministers and the deputy Tory chair all saying they oppose the Home Secretary's policy this week, a policy we know he and the Prime Minister don't even believe in. So, if the deputy Tory chair this week votes against the Home Secretary's policy, will he be sacked? Or is the Prime Minister so weak he's lost control of asylum, lost control of our borders and lost control of his own party too?
The members of Parliament on my side of the House are absolutely united in our desire, to get a grip of this issue. I am not the person who's held up a sign saying refugees welcome. I am not the person whose colleagues oppose each and every rhetorical flourish And until the party opposite comes up with a credible plan, I will not be taking their criticism any more seriously than they deserve.
Blackman.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sorry, I didn't hear you. The British people welcome people that come to this country and work and contribute to our economy. But those that abuse our hospitality, commit violent offences and are then sent to prison, need to be deported at the end of their sentences. So will my right honourable friend update the House on how many were deported last year and what action he's going to take to ensure that it's automatic that violent offenders leaving prison who are foreign nationals will be deported?
Mr. Speaker, we are clear that foreign criminals should be deported wherever possible. We will continue to do so. Mr. Speaker, this is in stark contrast to the calls to stop the deportation of foreign national criminals, those calls coming from the leader of the opposition and the party opposite. My honourable friend will please to know that FNO returns have increased by 19% in the last 12 months.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, my Slough constituents are often having to wait months to elicit a response for their asylum or Home Office queries. So, Home Secretary, given the Conservative government's persistent failure to effectively manage the asylum system, resulting in an almost 100,000 case backlog and the excessive use of expensive hotels, does he not feel that now is the time to adopt Labour's comprehensive plan, which would end the use of expensive hotels within 12 months and significantly reduce the backlog?
Minister.
I think he means the non-existent plan, Mr. Speaker. The fact is that last year we got on and made 112,000 initial decisions. If he has specific cases that he wishes to raise with me as the Minister, I am very happy to have a look at those. But the fact is the productivity improvements that we saw last year carries through a lot of learning as we now get on and we deal with the backlog. There's a lot of positive work that's gone on there. He should recognise that point.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Humberside Police now have over 800 more officers than in 2010, which obviously enables them to provide a better service to my constituents, but also crucial is top-class leadership, currently provided by Jonathan Everson, the Police Commissioner, and until recently Lee Freeman, the former Chief Constable, something I'm sure his successor will also provide. Would the Minister agree that top-class leadership is important, and what is he doing to ensure improvements to the present leadership training scheme?
Well, I join him in commending the progress Humberside Police have made, in particular under recent Chief Constable Lee Freeman. And in terms of improving leadership, of course, Lee Freeman is now one of Her Majesty's inspectors, and he can apply what he learned and then put into practice in Humberside across the whole country.
Wendy Chamberlain.
Mr. Speaker, on the 17th of October, the Government in the House pledged to make changes to ACRS Pathways 1 and 3. When can the House expect an update and a plan on this?
We, of course, are continuing to work very collaboratively across government in terms of the response to the situation in Afghanistan, fulfilling the commitments that we made to provide that sanctuary in the way that all of us want to see. We will come forward and say more about those efforts as soon as we're able.
Mr. Heard earlier about the effectiveness of the Safer Streets Fund, and Falmouth, in my constituency where most of the students live, recently received £67,000. In addition to that, our brilliant Police and Crime Commissioner Alison Hernandez has been working with Dawn Dines, who helped successfully change the law on spiking. But can my right honourable friend demonstrate to my Truro and Falmouth constituents how these positive changes will improve conviction rates in the Devon and Cornwall area?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for her question, and I congratulate her Police and Crime Commissioner for the excellent work that she's doing. She will be aware that we have amended the Offences Against the Person Act so that the offence of spiking is captured specifically and comprehensively in law, in part because we want more victims to come forward. But we are told time and again by the police that the most significant barrier to conviction is the length of time between the offence taking place and a toxicology report being received. Therefore, we are investing in rapid drink testing research so that we hope to bring the testing capacity on site.
Very much. UK Hospitality estimate that 95% of skilled worker visas that were gained last year would be lost under the new regulations. Now, that's a vital sector of my local economy in Edinburgh and for Scotland. So when will the Government recognise that the revision to the salary level was not sufficient and bring it down to a reasonable level?
Well, I disagree with the honourable lady's interpretation of the situation. The fact is that we should be working in a collaborative cross-government way, particularly to support domestic employment wherever that is possible. There are comprehensive steps being taken through the Back to Work plan to help deliver on that, and there are many people here on other routes who are perfectly able to work and with the right support would be doing that, and that's precisely where we're going to focus our efforts.
Mr. Speaker, could I ask what steps my honourable friend is taking to provide advice to police forces across the country to help them support communities during the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas?
Well, my honourable friend is right to ask this question because sadly we've seen an absolutely vile upsurge in anti-Semitism on our streets. We've seen people who claim to be speaking out for equality and justice actually defending people who take slaves, who violate women's and girls' rights, and here in our own country who make the Jewish community feel uncomfortable. That's exactly why this government has committed £18 million to the Community Safety Trust, and very sadly we've also had to commit £7 million to academic security. Sadly, there has been a massive increase in anti-Semitism in universities as well, and we are combating all of that.
Julian Lewis.
How many times must a demonstration in the same cause be repeated week in, week out before the well-funded organisers become liable to pay for at least part of the policing costs?
Mr. Speaker, of course, we recognise that there is legitimacy to public protest. We do also recognise that the unprecedented and unwarranted pressure that this is putting on policing around the country is having an impact on communities. My view is that the organisers have made their point. Repeating it does not strengthen their argument, and unfortunately we're also seeing some deeply distasteful people weaving themselves in amongst those protesters who are protesting on issues that they feel passionate about but whose goodwill is being abused by others.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could the Home Secretary urgently meet with his right honourable friend and neighbour, the member for Braintree, Braintree, I think he's Braintree, sorry, I can't remember the seat. Anyway, the member whose surname is Jenkin, to speak about why it is that when the whole House passed the Public Order Act with an amendment to have safe access zones for women using abortion clinics, it's now subject to consultation which would gut that legislation. Can you meet with us urgently? It's due on the 22nd of January, and it wouldn't actually do what all MPs from this House voted for.
I will endeavour to find out the details of the point the honourable lady made. She will write to me on this issue.
Final question, Tim Lawton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, last week the Home Secretary produced a report on safe and legal routes to comply with Section 61 of the Legal Migration Act and the amendment I tabled last year. It's very long and generous on the existing legal routes, but can he tell me how my 16-year-old orphan from a East African country with links to the UK, who is a genuine asylum seeker, will be helped to come legally and safely to the UK by what the government has published so far?
Well, my honourable friend is, of course, a very passionate advocate on this issue. We had a conversation last week about this very point. The fact is that since 2015, we've welcomed over 500,000 people through our safe and legal routes. We are introducing the cap precisely because we want to see that generosity extended in the years ahead, but the pressures of illegal migration in particular make that very, very challenging and very difficult. So this is precisely the sort of issue that I want to study with him as we move forward with the cap, to make sure that we do continue to help the most vulnerable people from around the world, working particularly with the UNHCR and others.
That completes questions.